Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you.
You know, I can't get enough of your new book here, and I know it's done very well. I think it released this past November, still selling like crazy. My Life in Dire Straits, and I don't know what I enjoy more of this, John, whether it's the pictures or your stories.
Well, I kept quite a few pictures out of there because I figured people might just use it as a picture book rather than actually read it.
Then it becomes a coffee table book, right?
Exactly. That comes out later. I know. I think there's probably enough photographs of Dire Straits in circulation. I just wanted to use relevant ones that would help illustrate the story, really, from the beginning, really, to where I am now.
Well, you know, and it's not a bad thing either, John, to where, you know, your fellow band member, obviously Mark Knopfler wrote the foreword for the book and complimented you on, you know, your great memory and putting this book together, covering the time of the band.
Yes, well, the thing is, I wasn't going to even put this out unless Mark was in agreement, really, because it's our story. It's not just mine, even though it's my story in Dire Straits, my life. But you know, it's really about him and I more than anything else, and what we did together all those years. Obviously, my childhood's separate, and what I did afterwards was separate. But a greater part of it needed to have. For me, it needed to have his acknowledgement because, you know, we're still very good friends. And if he'd said, "Oh my God, this is a disaster," I recommend you don't put it out, I would have said, "Sure, mate. Look, it's no big deal." I mean, you know. Anyway, he read it and he said, "I rather like it." And I said, "Do you like it enough to write the foreword?" And he said, "Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, of course I'll do that for you."
What a huge compliment. And you also had Roger Taylor from Queen and Mike Rutherford from Genesis. You know, they wrote some words about it also, but all of these were your contemporaries. Like we were talking before we started the interview, John, you know, when Dire Straits hit the scene and was so huge, you know, you guys dominated radio and MTV at that time.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the book, to be honest, Eric, is because I wanted to try and go back and kind of understand what that was all about, because there's been a certain amount of time has elapsed since those moments. And so it was very useful for me to go back and, in a sense, rejig my memory, relive the moment and try and make some sense of it, because actually it's important, I think, when you've done something like that, which was, you know, for me was a very big deal. And obviously for quite a few people around the world. Definitely. Was to put it in context of where I am now, from where I'd come from, and I think that was really the most important thing for me, was to put it in some kind of shape where it made sense, and so it did. I think I managed to pull it off.
I think you did very well, and it's so interesting to me too, with you being a bassist and a vocalist and everything. But you know, things that you learn from the book and within the chapters, such as, you know, the first gig was like a punk rock thing. I'm like going, it just is. It's like one of those things. It's like a Spinal Tap and Puppet Show. It's like Dire Straits and punk rock. It's like these things don't go together exactly.
Well, they didn't really go together on the day, to be honest. It was a slightly chaotic sort of show, but we had all the punk bands in our flat, which was about 20 yards away from where we performed. We plugged all the electricity into our grid in our flat, and all the punk boys came in. They were thoroughly nice lads, to be honest. They weren't nasty or anything. And so we tuned their guitars for them, which of course they hated because they'd never tuned their guitars before. And as soon as they got on stage, they detuned them.
Oh my gosh!
It was really weird. And these lovely guys we'd been having tea with in the flat suddenly started shouting how they hated everything, and we thought, Jesus, this is so weird. It's like they just put on another persona,
right?
You know, but you know, it was an experiment that day, and we actually played under the name of Cafe Racers. We didn't actually call ourselves Dire Straits at the time because we hadn't got the name then.
Yeah. You know, and that's what I found interesting also, to where, you know, with you and other band members, you know, had different takes on how Dire Straits evolved. And certainly with yours being documented, it's like going, I think, you know, all of us in life, and particularly musicians and bands, have been in dire straits, you know, to where it's like, you know, you're going, you know, how am I going to eat tomorrow? You know, it's like, wow, we're having ramen again, you know?
Yeah, well, that's that name came from a mate of Pick's, because Pick was really the only professional musician in the band, to be honest. And his mate said to him, "You've been a musician all your life, Pick, but you're still in Dire Straits. Why didn't you call the band that?" And that's how that's where it came from. Simple as that. So you're right. I mean, when most bands start off, they are struggling.
Right.
You know, I mean, when we first started, it was 25 quid and a pint of beer and enough petrol for the car, and that was it, really.
And I love that picture also that's in the book, to where it shows you standing there, and the caption is, it's like, we got one beer apiece, 25 quid. And it's like, there you go. And you guys are happy as can be in the picture.
Well, yes. I mean, the thing is that when you're involved in this thing, and you realize you're doing it for another reason rather than making money.
Right.
The money side of things, it comes to some people, and thankfully, you know, success came to us. But that wasn't really the intention. The intention was to put a whole bunch of songs together, entertain people, and it turned out that quite a few people liked it. So I think that's the way most people start. I don't really know. I mean, when I talked to, you know, Mike from Genesis and Roger, they all started the same way. You know, Roger Taylor. I mean, you know, we're all part of that early sort of jigsaw puzzle, which is a musical life, which some of the bits fit together, and then the rest of the time you spend trying to work out why they did fit together.
Well, you know, I've got to bring this up too, John, where it's like, you know, when you look back over your musical career, and you're definitely still a creative catalyst, you know, moving forward even now, but it's like over 120 million albums sold. I mean, with all the awards, the gold records and everything else, it has to be kind of astounding when you look back that was, you know, such a huge part of your life that you were, you know, living.
Well, yes, and I go back to the book again. That's the reason why I wrote it. I mean, the figures that are sort of, to me, they're mind-boggling. And don't get me wrong, you know, Mark and I really did enjoy the success. We didn't enjoy the fame bit too much, so we kind of avoided that as much as possible. But I think success, you know, should be enjoyed if you're doing something that you love doing, you know, and that came as a consequence of other people going the journey with us, in a sense, an audience that literally picked up with the first album, then they liked the second album, and then Making Movies comes along, and that's a different thing altogether, and they enjoyed that. Romeo and Juliet, Tunnel of Love. And, you know, in the band, we had a songwriter who was, I think, is pretty unique, an incredible observer of everyday life and his past life, you know, because a lot of the early stuff, down to the Waterline, things like that, were about his, you know, his first sort of little dalliances with girls on, you know, in Newcastle, and so beautifully put together. You know, and every band needs good songs. I mean, it's as simple as that. If anybody says to me, what do we do about how to get successful? I said, well, write a good song, and you know, that's quite a good start. If you can.
And that's the heart of it. You know, without the good songs, and you guys have so many incredible hit songs, and the albums and everything else went over. But, you know, I wanted to bring up also, John, that some viewers may not realize that creatively, you've really become quite the artist as a painter, you know, with art shows, and an entrepreneur with your own pub, multiple hotels. But I love it that you pursued the art angle as well, and continue to.
Well, when I've been painting really since I was 14, and playing the guitar since I was 14 as well. So the two things sort of ran side by side. And I was either going to go to art college and be a complete failure and be penniless right now, or I was going to join a rock and roll band. And of course, it's everybody's dream to join a rock and roll band, and you know, just for the hell of it. And then if you make some success, that's even better. But art's always been in the background with me, and because I've always loved from a very early age looking at a painting and getting some energy from it. It's a sort of, it's like music. It's a shared experience between the artist and the viewer. And so I promised myself when Mark and I decided to call a day to it in 93, 94, or whatever it was, I can't remember now, that we were going to just, you know, okay, that's great. That's it. Dire Straits, fantastic, great legacy and all of it. I think I'm going to go back to painting, because the thing is, Eric, when you stop something like Dire Straits, there's a massive vacuum.
Right.
Suddenly,
Void.
the thing you've been doing since you were, for 18, 19 years, suddenly comes to a halt, and you go, now what?
Right.
And I had the art to fall back on.
Yeah.
And so I really went into that in a big. I put the bass guitar against the wall, and I just started painting. And it took me about 8 or 9 years for a gallery to say, "That's not bad. Can we try and do a show with you?"
Wow.
9 years of solid painting. I had a few lessons from a friend of mine, and but pretty much self-taught.
But it's like a whole new career, even though you've done it since you were a teenager, 14.
Yeah.
To relaunch that, and obviously you've always kept your hand in music, done your
Yeah.
solo albums and everything else. But I think it's so inspirational that you threw yourself back into painting and with galleries and art shows and everything. I mean, what a great outlet, John.
Well, I was never going to give up the art, and I was never going to give up the music, because I took quite a few years off the music. I did do a few sessions with friends and stuff, but not very much. And then you mentioned the Irish guys. I got back in with that until my liver couldn't stand it any longer. And I'm serious. We're talking heavy drinking here. And then I started writing more music again. So this album that's just come out is my 8th solo album. Not many people know that, but so I've been busy. Every couple of years I put an album out.
Right.
And it's just something that I kind of need to do. I write ideas down, I play on the piano occasionally, and I record everything that I do, write down everything I'm thinking about, and eventually another jigsaw puzzle starts to emerge, and suddenly you've got an album on your hands, and I call the boys in and we go and record it.
How incredible.
It's a process, but it's a bit more complicated than that, because you change a lot of things as you're going along in order that it gets as good as you can get it, really. I learned a lot from Mark about songwriting. I must make that point. He was a great influence on my writing.
I want to make sure for our viewers, John, that they know where to go, for your book, My Life in Dire Straits, your 8th studio album, obviously your artwork, everything else you're doing. Where is the best place for them to go on the web and social media to keep up with everything that you're doing?
Well, I have a very nice lady who looks after my social media, because I'm afraid I'm rather inept at that kind of stuff. But I've got John Illsley Music is, I think it's John at, if you put John Illsley on Instagram, it comes up. Yeah. And the website is johnillsley.com. And then there's a Facebook page. There's all the usual stuff going on. I mean, I'm not very good at it, and I'd rather concentrate on other things, but somebody that takes care of it. She asked me if this is okay to put up, and I say yes or no, and I send her things. And that's the way it works. So it's actually, it's a great tool to keep communicating with people. I know people criticize all the digital marketing these days, or connections, but for me, it's a wonderful communication tool, and I don't think we should knock it. I know it gets abused. We all know that, but a lot of things in life get abused. But I think there's some good things about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's.
Well, I'll tell you what, speaking of good things, I think everybody definitely needs to get a copy of My Life in Dire Straits, John Illsley's book that came out. I'm hoping there's going to be a documentary, obviously more music, more paintings. John, thank you so much for coming on the Rock Interview today.
It's a pleasure. Very nice to meet you, Eric.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of a Bobby Bones Show.